Imagine surrounding yourself with incredible women who've overcome challenges, they've rebounded after failures and disappointments, and women who are not afraid to shine their brilliance to make a mark in the world. These women support other like-minded women because they know there is plenty of opportunity for everyone, and that together we really can make a difference, grow our businesses while have fun along the way. This is what Women in Leadership Podcast is all about. Welcome. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Grab a cuppa of your favourite beverage, pull up a chair, and let's get this conversation started. And welcome to another episode. So joining me today is Dr. Christi Diamond. Dr. Christi, she is a naturopathic doctor, a relationship expert, a speaker, and author with over 15 years of experience guiding high-achieving women and power couples through deep transformation. She's the visionary behind Healing Acres, which is an exclusive retreat center, and she specializes in helping driven leaders reclaim their feminine essence, heal relationship wounds, and unlock their full potential in love and in life. Now, she has expertise in trauma healing, biohacking, subconscious reprogramming, and has worked with thousands of women and also teams with her husband. She's worked with couples, or they've worked with couples, integrating cutting-edge science with soul-level healing. Now, on today's show, Dr. Christi is going to share how trusting yourself leads to true authenticity. She's going to talk about why faith and spiritual connection provide strength and direction, as well as how to navigate disappointment without letting it define you. So welcome to the show, Dr. Christi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Me too. As you would have heard in the introduction, this conversation is about bouncing back from failures and disappointment. So I love how you've mentioned disappointment, how to navigate that and without letting it define you. And this podcast, Women in Leadership, came about after what I call my worst business failure ever. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to surround myself with incredible women who've walked a similar path to me. I'm going to learn everything I can from them. And, the rest is history. Here we are today. So love the topic that you're going to talk about today. Let's dive in. How is trusting ourselves, how does that lead to true authenticity? What insights can you share here?
Oh, that's such a good and yummy topic. I love that because, and first of all, thank you so much for having something specifically for women in business, because I actually would say it's different. It's different for us for sure. And we have different challenges than men do in business. And so I love that you're bringing this focus. And I think, women in collaboration can be so powerful, so powerful. So I love doing this with you today. Talking about our intuition. Interestingly enough, being a relationship expert and a doctor, putting all the puzzle pieces together, what I found is, number one, where did we lose our intuition or tapping into it to trust ourselves is actually a big question to ask ourselves. When did I lose trust with myself? And what we have found in the medicine that I was trained in, it's called New German medicine. And so Western medicine is like, just kind of, let's see what's wrong and either cut it out or medicate it. Sorry, just being real. And then Eastern medicine is, where's the body out of alignment? Let's get the body into alignment. And I was taught differently from that, where it's your psychology becomes your biology that then becomes your pathology. So we've got to go back to the body obeying the psyche and what's happening there. And so most women actually, at least in the Western world, have lost what we would call their feminine essence, which I call their serenity, between the ages of 8 and 11, and maybe even younger, depending on, what happened. Maybe it was through sexual trauma. Maybe it was through dad leaving. Maybe it was, it could be even dad wanted a boy and treated you like a boy instead of a girl, all these things. And so in in studying all this and studying relationships and studying the biological nature, which is something that is actually not talked about when it comes to relationships, interestingly enough, really is the biological nature and how that affects our relationships. So most women lost their serenity between ages 8 and 11, taking them to a place of survival patterns in the masculine energy, which they go into relationship with. And that's actually usually about the time they either, what I found is two things have happened. They've stopped trusting, actually three things. They've stopped trusting themselves. It affects how they trust men. And it actually affects how they receive from God or their higher power. So imagine how much that's taken us off course if we're not in our biological nature, trusting ourselves as women. We're not authentically ourselves because we are not true to nature. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
So
totally.
if we aren't true to our nature, then we can't truly live to our fullest potential or capacity. And until we honor our biological nature, we cannot fulfill our divine nature. And
Yes.
so leaning into trusting ourselves begins with bringing back what we lost in the first place. And when we have that, there's more of a solidarity within ourselves to know our own answers, to know what we're here to do, to know what our calling is. And that brings the authenticity of living the most authentic life ever, is what was meant for us in particular, uniquely our own.
Yes.
Nobody else is here to do.
Yeah. And what I love about what you've said about that too, there could be a circumstance or situation in life between those particular ages that you identified earlier. But then you also see what's happening around in the world, the messages that we're shared across movies and, all of the different media platforms. So that I think also can contribute to a misunderstanding of, well, what is our true authenticity? So all of that in the mixing pot can make for a lot of things that we need to weigh through to get to that. So let's then have a look at, well, when you define true authenticity and when we've gone through that healing process, what should that look like? Because sometimes we don't even know what it is that we should be aiming for, or what it is that I should be looking to try and achieve. What is authenticity for me? Are you able to define that? I mean, I know it could probably be an entire show on that, but how would you define true authenticity and what that would look like when you're really stepping into it?
Absolutely. Well, even helping women heal their serenity and bringing that back to them, the shifts they see within themselves, and what they do notice is, number one, they tend to speak up for their needs a little bit more. Like, we as women have, somewhere along the way, there is a lot of socialization, of putting everyone else before us, people pleasing, all the things. And so it's owning your voice in a way that is true to you, as opposed to being who, maybe someone else expected us to be. It's also knowing our answers, to where we stop outsourcing our inner authority and we start looking inward, knowing our answers came with us and we know what those are. So it's having more certainty about the direction we're walking in life and how we're doing that. And it's also, in authenticity, we stop self-compromising, which often happens even in relationships, where we give up our truest selves in order to be loved, or we put on the costume that we were taught to put on in order to be loved. We take that off, and we give ourselves permission to fully be ourselves, to honor ourselves, to live in our desires, to not shrink away from what we're here to do. And so it's not living fearlessly, because we're always going to have fears come up. I mean, let's be real about that. But it's living in a way that feels truer to you. And so you don't feel the imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is more so about living out who you're not than trying to pretend you're someone you're not. So it's really being true to that and understanding that. And there's this just kind of an inner peace and actually a different sense of confidence that we walk in when we're living in authenticity. And it
Yes.
really is just daily, not compromising who we are, not lowering our values, to have the relationships we want or the positions we want or whatever that is.
Yeah. As you're sharing those wonderful insights, one of the things that came to my mind is, how so often, and you use the word collaboration. I know as women, if we look at the way men are doing business, we often assume, well, that's the way that I need to do business. I mean, I would say too that men should look at some of the ways they're doing business. I remember years ago when I was in the career industry, and we would share with people, when you're going in for a negotiation, you don't want to go for a win-lose, that you get so much of a salary that your work can't afford to pay for you because you're not contributing equal. It should be a win-win. And so when you're doing business and collaborating, it should always be from a win-win collaborative. How can we both win from that and walk away with, incredible gifts from that, collaboration? And how often the world looks at, well, we're going to win, we're going to do it at all costs, and it doesn't matter where you are going to land. And I know we're both Christians, Christi, so the Lord just does not want business leadership, the whole lot, to work that way. Everyone can win. There is so much opportunity. No one needs to be on the losing side of things. And I think this is so true when we're looking at ourselves as women, putting ourselves last. We don't have to do that. We can still be at our best, reclaim the time that we need, and it still be okay for others to do that as well. One thing I want to ask you, sometimes we can get stuck in our stuckness and we don't even realize that there is potential for so much more because we're really stuck in our stuckness. What would you say to someone then who may not recognize that they're reliving patterns that are keeping them stuck? Whether it's in their career, whether it's in their relationships. What are some things, some indicators that may show someone, hey, this could be handled very differently when you go through healing? On the other side is things that you would never imagine would be possible. What are some things that they could look out for, indicators?
Well, one is if you're not actually getting the outcomes you desire, like, self-sabotage could look like the same thing keeps happening over and over. I've worked with women, married and single, who are just like, I keep meeting the same men and it's, it ends the same way. That there's a pattern, right? If you're saying same a lot, when things are happening in life, it's just like you're in a pattern, right? If you continue to have the same outcomes, whether it's losing a job and then maybe losing your home, and it's just like, what is happening that continues to create these patterns is something to look at. But it's also, we've got to let go of letting our experience become our identity, right? And when we go into that place of and I'll tell women this, there's a whole different energy to saying, I've experienced the disillusion of a marriage as opposed to I'm divorced, right? I've now put a label on me. And when I say I'm divorced, everybody's thoughts and opinions come in, and it's just like, ooh, there's something that goes with that label, right? Or I'm a widow, or I've experienced the death of a spouse. Is totally different. There's a whole different energy. So whatever we start to identify with in our patterns, they can become so much a part of our identity that we go into this place of stuckness and we don't see any way out of it. Like it's like, this is my life, this is my story. If you're often telling people your story, you're probably in patterns. If you're repeating the same stories over and over and over, you're probably in patterns. And if you keep re-experiencing things over and over and over. And in the movie, It Ends With Us, I love the line. This was so powerful to me, where she says, if we don't break the patterns break us.
Yes.
And that's so true. They do break us if we don't recognize that there are patterns and choose to break them ourselves.
And I think that's important, isn't it? It will start with us. That saying, I can't remember who it was, but be the change you want to see in other people. And so often when we get stuck in patterns, and we're going to share some things, and we hope that people will hold on to these, because this could just be what you're waiting for that will completely change the rest of your life. And so it's so easy to look at, well, this person didn't do this, or this situation is that, and when we're often pointing outwardly at what is not happening, or what's happening that's not right, we lose such a wonderful opportunity to start looking in ourselves and saying, well, what can I change about this?
Mhm.
What impact am I contributing, or what am I contributing that is impacting to that? And it takes some courage, doesn't it? It takes some boldness, but it's often the first step, isn't it? How are we contributing to that? And sometimes we just don't want to look at it because maybe, just maybe, the one common denominator is us.
Is us. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yes. That does
So
happen.
what would you then say? What's a great first step so that we can start to trust ourselves? Because would you say that a lot of times for people who continue those cycles and maybe realize, look, I think there's some work to be done, it is because there's a bit of fear, that the lack of trust in themselves. What have you found that
Yeah.
that gets people from, I understand, okay, work needs to be done, to I'm doing the work, I'm going to do that, get the healing I need?
Well, there has to be a recognition. There has to be, first of all, a desire for things to be different, for change to
Mm.
happen. If the desire is not there for things to be different, we will stay in that pattern. And actually, like I said, it can become an identity. But first of all, it's the desire of so very often I find with women, they have stopped actually stating their desires. They've stopped going into the place of wanting. It's thinking that it can't happen, not for me, or. And so first of all, let's get familiar with what our desires are, and that can bring us energy to walk towards them. So it's even making a list of, what are my desires. I'll sit there and I'll tell women, because I talk a lot about relationship as a relationship expert, talking to women about their desires in relationship and things. And so we'll start a running list in the phone, and it actually opens up a lot of energy to be stating your desires and putting them into place, or at least expressing them, because they haven't expressed them for a long time, right? And I'm like, what's possible? So part of it is living in possibility. We've got to live in possibility instead of restricting ourselves into our stories. So when we live in possibility, we get to write down what those possibilities are. And possibilities open us up to everything, to all things. And they're not limiting. It's just, what could be possible for me? What do I desire for myself? And it could be literally simply like, oh, I would love to have a cup of cacao today. I love cacao. Or I would love it if I got to go on a trip to Hawaii this year. These are some of my own desires, right? And even in expressing those to our partner, him in the masculine energy will look to help problem solve it if we allow it and if we express it in that way. I would love this. I'd be happy. This would make me so happy. These are some of the things that we talk about. Is expressing desires is a way to get yourself out of the stuckness, because you're on the other side living in the possibility of it rather than the restriction or the scarcity of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because then your attention and your focus is on the possibility, the desire, rather than continuing to focus on what it is that you don't want. Can't remember who said, but you will often attract or get more of what your attention is on, because we could pinpoint so many things
Yes.
are not going well. But how about pointing out the things that are going really well? So let's segue into why faith and spiritual connection are so important, because they provide strength and direction.
Yes. I grew up with my dad saying, I cannot imagine a day without prayer. I just remember him saying that, and it hit me like, it was just like, oh, wow. Like, just how prayer was such an important part of his life. And for me, my conversations with God are very intentional. They're the first thing I do in the morning. They're very directed with, guide me, strengthen me, help me to know what direction to walk in, because I kind of consider God, I'm in the maze down here, and I call Earth School, and he's up there, in just kind of a different perspective, to be like, okay, turn right, turn left, getting out of the maze or whatever. But spirituality and that connection and having that faith is so important to really honing in on what is your calling? Like, we can get so caught up in life and the little things that we forget, like, we are truly spiritual beings having a human experience. And so when I talk about this whole, I'm very much a visionary, and that's how God speaks to me, is through pictures in my mind and visions and things. And I I truly feel like I have a medicine I bring to the world. I feel like everyone has a medicine they bring to the world, and people are starving for the medicine we bring to the world. And if we all brought our medicine to the world, I can't even imagine how amazing and glorious this earth would be, especially right now. But I had this vision, and I was standing at the front of the line, and I was pouring a pitcher into these cups, and these women were just waiting to drink this medicine. And I saw this huge long line, and I thought, gosh, how am I going to get this medicine to this many women? And then 10 women stepped forward in collaboration, and they were like, we'll help you get this medicine out, right? And then all of a sudden I saw this beam of light go up into the heavens, and I was taken back to my book of life. I was standing before I came to earth, and I was at my book of life, and there was this 3-dimensional picture there, and there was these 2 strands of light. And I just kept walking around it, studying it. And then I saw how it was connected into a woman's body, into the womb. The bottom part was the womb, and then it went up her spine and out of her head. And I was like, what is that? Like, and literally it was her serenity. And I saw that it was connected to her womb, which was creation, right? Mm-hmm. And then going up out and out of her head into the world, like this beam of light. And the 2 strands were of light were intertwined with each other. And I saw that when this was cut off, that it cut her off again from trusting men and then receiving fully from God. And so part of that is like, number one, if we don't trust men, it's kind of hard to trust God, like truly, because that's the all giving, all powerful protector, provider, masculine energy. And when we sink into that and open up that space, what then is possible? And so we might be receiving in some capacity, but if we don't have that back with us, that full connection with God in our spirituality, then we aren't living to our fullest capacity. And I've seen too many people. I work in trauma. Like, that is, to my core, my specialty is deep trauma work. And I see how much our disconnection from God really severs our tie to all of who we are, because it's like, it's almost like having a lamp and the cord's not plugged into the wall. And so the light is not on, and it can't shine, and it can't be bright, because we've got to plug into the source that brings that to us, right? And to me, it's absolutely essential. And I find it's very essential in relationship too. There's so many couples that are like, they don't know how to bring that element into relationship, to, praying together, being on the same page together. And I really do believe that there's 3 people in that relationship. It's God and husband and wife together that create the most powerful force on earth. I don't know if you've ever read the book Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, but it's a very powerful book. And he talks about, he's in this conversation with the devil, and he's asking him all these questions. And at the end of the book, he says, the force I cannot penetrate is a couple, a man and woman united with God. That is the force that I cannot penetrate. And so that is the most powerful force on earth, is having God with us. I call him, the CEO of my company. I do God journaling. We have a scripture study. We actually, I have a movement called HER, which is funny, right? HER stands for Healing, Expansion, and Receiving. And we meet on Fridays, and we say, let's talk about God. And so we have these conversations about, how does God communicate with us in particular? And I just love it, because we all have our own unique language. It's like we are special and unique, and he shows us that in our communication and what we do. So I can't imagine doing this life, doing my work without that source at the helm to guide and direct me. So I stay on path to what I'm here to do.
Yeah, so powerful, so powerful. And that then really leads beautifully into the last point. And I know that we've touched on, or you've touched on, about we need to be mindful not to take on labels on ourselves. And so often disappointments, the labels will come from that. And, you know, it's not just externally, other people with the labels. We're really good at women at labeling ourselves. So let's talk about navigating disappointment without letting it define you, because I know through, and I'm sure you've got examples too, it's been the moments that you have been at your lowest when you cling on to the Lord. It can be the greatest learning and lessons and shaping of character that you use along the journey, and the possibilities and opportunities that come to your path. But if you let it, of course, if you
Yeah.
allow that to come through. So how do we start to navigate disappointment? Because no one likes to, you know, that F word, the fail word, no one likes that, but we can
Yeah.
so easily let them define us.
Well, I would say two things about it. One, I would say that if we're living in disappointment often, we're probably also living in expectation often. And we probably need to kind of renegotiate what some of those expectations are, or let go of expectation and allow and surrender things to happen. Now, I have lived in disappointment. I and feeling, I mean, I'll go to the point. So when I was going through a divorce many years ago, my marriage was ending. Now it needed to end. At that point, though, I was a physically abused wife, mentally abused wife, and I kept clinging to something that just needed to end, honestly. But I had 3 young children. I had 3 boys, and I literally thought my life was over. I was just like, oh my gosh, and I was in just such a deep depression of like disappointed at myself, at life, I failed at marriage. I'd just all these things. And I'm kind of an overachiever. So I think I probably took it 10 levels deeper, and so deep in despair and disappointment that I was literally having 3 young boys. Their dad had left. He was not part of our lives. And I remember going into my closet and literally praying to die. I was like, God, just take me. Here's the mother of 3 kids, right? I was clinically depressed, not even recognizing that I was, and just saying, God, please, just like there's got to be a better person for these 3 little boys than me, because I'm not cutting it. I failed at marriage. And literally just in utter frustration and utter just hopelessness and despair, crying out to God and just saying, just take me. I can't take one more thing. I don't have 1 ounce of anything left in me. And literally feeling arms wrap around me as I sobbed and cried and fell asleep, and getting to that place of literally the peace that surpasses all understanding. Just nothing changed when I woke up. I mean, everything was still, but I had this peace within me. And I look at that moment now and I see where I've come from that moment. And I'll tell you that my work that I do in trauma is I can walk to the darkest edges with people because I've walked there myself. But the thing is, I came back. I didn't stay in. I didn't give up. I didn't choose, the other end of that. And I walked back, and we are going to have those moments, and they are human moments, and they are full of anguish and heartache and despair, to be in deep, in that deep disappointment or the failure. But there's something so rich in connecting to when we have nothing left, when we have no control, when we feel like we have no power, to go to that place, to walk back and to see who we can become. And I remember putting this saying on my mirror when I was going through my divorce, and it said, pain can do one of 2 things. It can either destroy you or make you reach for the highest within. And every day I made a choice to reach for the highest within. Like it was like somehow, some way, I'm going to grasp it if I have to. And so going away from the disappointment, we can look at it as our greatest tool is to understand how we can control our energy and where we go with our thoughts, or where those take us. In fact, Tony Robbins talks about that. He talks about having power over our energy and our state of being, and we get to choose into that every day. It's a decision. So we can have our moments, we can have our emotions. I discourage people from just pushing those down of like, oh, I'm disappointed, but it's just like, get real why you're disappointed. Why, what are you thinking it's saying about you? And going to the place of being okay that disappointment's going to happen. I think we as human beings sometimes think we're never supposed to be disappointed. We're never supposed to, like, what did we think? We were just going to have this perfect life. It's part of life. So going to that place, but truly when I go to disappointment now, when I know where I've been, this is minute compared to where I've been. And so I get up and I keep going again, and I keep doing and being who I'm here to be. And so one is to reach higher within yourself and to reach up. Those are two things I would say when you're in that place.
Yeah. It's beautiful, beautiful. We've got some wonderful comments coming through too. So through Facebook. So Heidi McLean, God journaling is amazing. Dr. Christi is extraordinary. And Diona Evans has been highlighting some of the key things that you've been saying there, Dr. Christi. So that's wonderful. Thank you both, ladies. And I know there's other people that be watching and listening and benefiting as well. And what's really important about all of that is that even though circumstances and situations around us can be quite dire, that leaning up, we get our strength, don't we? And as you said, the peace that surpasses all understanding. The world can be falling apart, and yet you just know that you will be okay, because we will. For those of us who love the Lord. So wonderful. We could continue to speak for hours, I'm sure. But I'd love for you to share. How can people get in contact with you? You've got your web address there. We'll mention it. I'll get you to mention it so people who may be listening to the audio recording can jot that down so that they can go and visit.
At thehealingcoach.com. We actually are here in Oklahoma. In the States, and we have a healing center here. We have a retreat center that we run, and we do women's retreats and men's retreats and couples intensives. We're actually doing a virtual retreat of Healing Your Serenity. So yes, you can get in touch with me at thehealingcoach.com. Please reach out. I'd love to talk to you and hear your path and your story and where you're wanting to go with your own life.
Wonderful. And before we went live, Dr. Christi, we said, I must get you back on another one of the podcasts, the Christian Entrepreneurs podcast, to talk about, you mentioned about the different paths of medicine. And there's some wonderful, I think, medicine that God has actually created with his own hand that can do incredibly well for our bodies. So anyway, I'd love for you to share a lot more with that. And we may just share it on this podcast as well, this in Women in Leadership. I think it'll bless many listeners here too. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks for all that you are doing in the world. Thank you so much.
And you too. You too. Hey, it's Anne-Marie. Before I go, are you a coach or a consultant who feels like the world's best kept secret? Your experience is vast, yet secretly you're frustrated because despite all of your hard work, you're just not getting the visibility, leads, or new clients you'd hope for, and you don't know why? I've created free training and resources that'll help you build visibility, generate leads, and enroll dream clients with ease because you're seen as a trusted authority, even in a crowded marketplace. And you've positioned yourself as the choice versus just a choice with your unique, uncopyable, and unforgettable brand and message. And you're able to nurture listeners into leads from your podcast, even from your first episode. To access these free resources, go to ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/community. That's ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/community.